So, how do we actually prove what's undeniably real in an era where AI can generate literally anything? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're tracing an incredible evolution, the evolution of authorship. We're going to completely rethink what it means to be a recorder of reality and ultimately see how human effort, our actual physical sweat, is the absolute ultimate anchor of truth. Here's our roadmap. We're going to look at the myth of objectivity, trace the lineage of the record, hit the gonzo paradigm, talk about overriding automated miasma, and finally land on cheerbot and physical truth. Let's get into it. Section 1, the myth of objectivity. From passive capture to subjective curation. Okay, let's shatter a huge misconception right off the bat. Historically, field recording was obsessed with this idea of extractivist listening. It's basically the idea of a scientist sneaking through a forest trying to be completely invisible to capture pure, untouched audio, like no human footprints, no anthropogenic noise whatsoever. The goal was to pretend the recordist just wasn't there. But as modern acoustic studies have shown, yeah, that's just a myth. You literally cannot separate the observer from the environment. And actually, field recording didn't even start with a microphone. It started with a subjective field journal. Think about Lewis and Clark. They weren't just passively logging data. Picture them sitting by a muddy river, absolutely exhausted, swatting mosquitoes, and actively deciding which details to write down. Their fair copy journals were this original deterministic layer. They took that chaotic, wild experience and synthesized it into a curated reflection. The very first locally owned device for sovereign reflection wasn't a machine at all. It was the human mind, using actual physical energy to put pen to paper. Moving on to Section 2, the lineage of the record, the evolution of the subjective strike. So when audio recording first became a thing, we saw two totally different approaches. On one hand, you had Cecil Sharp's selective salvage of Appalachian music. He basically went in and filtered reality through his own biases, only recording what he personally deemed authentic. But then, contrast that with Alan Lomax. Lomax didn't treat a song like coal to be extracted. He cared about the singer's metabolism. And by metabolism, I mean the breathing, the room noise, the physical struggle, the whole context. He was capturing life in motion, not just isolated audio. By doing that, Lomax essentially created the first record of sweat. He validated the human element. There's this incredible quote from the source material that hits the nail on the head. Any recording that excludes the recorder's state is a clinical lie. Let that sink in for a second. A clinical lie. That totally wrecks the idea of sterile, perfectly objective data, right? You just can't strip the observer out of the equation without losing the truth. Which brings us to Section 3, the gonzo paradigm. The recorder is the story. By 1970, this idea sparked a massive cultural disruption, led by none other than Hunter S. Thompson. He was this chaotic force who completely threw journalistic neutrality out the window. Instead of standing quietly on the sidelines, Thompson threw himself right into the madness. He used his tape recorder to document his own metabolic state in the middle of the action, the shouting, the running, the sheer adrenaline. He realized that to get to the emotional truth, the journalist had to be the protagonist. You literally have to be in the arena. If you look at how they compare, traditional journalism always tried to keep the reporters safely behind a velvet rope. Third person, detached observer, factual objectivity. You report the news, you don't make it. But gonzo? Totally the opposite. It demands first-person active involvement. It's about bodily and psychological immersion to find that core emotional truth. It completely destroyed the illusion of the detached observer. So map this all out, and a really undeniable trend emerges. Our desire to physically record our subjective truths has just kept accelerating. From Lewis and Clark's handwritten journals in the 1800s, to Alan Lomax's metabolic audio in the 30s, to Thompson's gonzo chaos in the 70s. And that brings us to today, the 2020s, and something totally wild, the cheerbot. Section 4. Overriding automated miasma, AI versus biological friction. This is where our long history of subjective recording faces its biggest threat yet. Think about the AI systems we're using right now. They generate what's called an automated miasma. Since AI has never lived, never breathed, never actually felt anything, it doesn't have true intent. It's just guessing, creating this lossy fog of reality. You have to counter that automated fog with proactive distortion. That's the deliberate human intent, the biological friction you feel when you force yourself to write a sentence or make a decision. The machine is just guessing, so we have to grab the wheel. And the foundational rules of this new digital framework make it clear. Human friction is non-negotiable if we want to stop data degradation.
manual authorship overrides automated miasma. If we aren't actively intervening, if we aren't putting in the sweat, the machine's soulless guesswork just takes over completely. Our truth simply evaporates into the fog.
So how do we actually take our chaotic human intent and get it into a machine without the AI just hallucinating what we mean? We use a semiotic bridge. Think of text as this ultimate bottleneck. To cross from our messy, fluid human brains into cold, rigid silicon, we have to squeeze our thoughts through strictly formatted text like JSON or Python code. That text is the bridge that safely maps our boundless imagination right down into physical hardware execution. Which leaves us with a pretty massive question. How do we actually anchor subjective truth in a fully automated world? If the machine running the code has no soul, how do we mathematically prove, like beyond any shadow of a doubt, that a living, breathing human was at the wheel making the decisions? The answer is the record of sweat. This is the absolute ultimate validation of somatic experience. It proves a human heart was beating and calories were burned. It's literally a cryptographic, mathematical proof that real metabolic human energy, physical horsepower, and true intent were spent to create a record. It takes the old legal doctrine of the sweat of the brow and revives it to lock in bit-perfect, human-driven truth today. And that brings us to Section 5. Cheerbot and physical truth, closing the loop with leaf node logistics. Let's look at the actual physical manifestation of all this. Tucked inside a 3D printed shell is the Flow X42 Cheerbot. It's essentially a little robotic vending machine for your desk. It's a localized micro-host running on a simple Raspberry Pi, and it records your actions using a mathematically pure format called a LIFO-JSON state tree. That basically just means it logs what you do in exact order, completely bypassing centralized big tech middlemen. Researchers call this the modern gonzo field journal. It's journaling the ambient narrative of you. Let's break down how this flawlessly turns a digital thought into physical reality. First, a LIFO root hash anchors your state data into an unchangeable cryptographic chain. Second, a KAI wrapper gives that digital action a legal identity in the real world. Third, the record of sweat steps in to mathematically verify that, yes, actual human calories authorize this. And finally, number 4, that verified action trickles down to trigger the physical GPIO pins, the actual electrical connectors on the board. It's honestly kind of magical when you think about it. Bit-perfect digital truth is violently and irreversibly snapping into the real world. Pure math is being seamlessly translated into literal electrical signals to spin a motor, flick a switch, or dispense a physical tip right there on your desk. Your digital intent isn't trapped behind a screen anymore. It becomes tangible, physical action. Like the foundational text says, the human pilot applies the intent, but the agentic cell executes the sweat. The code you write, that's just the instruction. The machine is merely the paintbrush, but the human? We provide the horsepower, the friction, the true intent. We are the undeniably real painter. So I want to leave you with one final provocative thought before you write your next line of code or record your next environment. As we transition from just being digital tenants stuck in the automated miasma of AI to becoming sovereign owners wielding the cryptographic record of sweat, what are you going to program reality to do? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.